Hi, listeners and viewers, and is fifth episode of Apple Treats with Danis and Irina, and our special guest. This episode is dedicated to security and privacy for users and developers.
Yeah, right. So our guest is Anastasiia Voitova, and we will probably let her introduce herself. So Anastasiia, welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Happy to be here. That's my first time on Apple Trades podcast. So yay. My name is Anastasiia and I'm security software engineer at Kozak Labs. So I do data security, I do cryptography, and I often work with developers and help them to improve security of their applications. And of course, as security topic is kind of related, it's not the same, but it's kind of related to privacy. Today, we will talk about both security and privacy.
Right. But before we go into privacy and security, there was quite important update for Apple developers. So WWDC 21 was announced. And probably my question here would be, what are your expectations here? So is there something you would like to Apple to announce on WW?
Well, my expectations are purely personal. I expect tons of new content and, the feeling of, missing out, the feeling that there are some developers that will explore those topics and it's me who is busy with my security work and I won't watch all the videos. But I think that this feeling is all developers feel the same during WWDC. The event is cool, but at the same time, we often feel overwhelmed with the amount of new content, right? Danis and Ira, what do you think about WWDC?
I want them to surprise me somehow, like it was announced in Swift that nobody expected. So I'm sure there will be a lot of new useful stuff, but I want to something not improved, but principle new.
Right. Yeah. Well, we kind of know that there will be something to Swift like concurrency, which probably might increase application stability and in turn maybe security. I mean, some bugs. Well,
I hope they won't announce new Swift. Oh my god, I won't new Swift. No, maybe new minor version. That's fine. New features. That's okay. But major changes in the language. No, please, no.
Well,
I also
async await is there. Yeah. Well, come on.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I mean, many languages have async await, so we can live with this, right?
Right.
I don't want a new Swift. It was an example introducing something new.
Some excitement would be fun.
Maybe some new sensors or
I
have before.
Yeah. I also noticed that for security updates, for example, and for privacy updates, Apple doesn't stuck to WWDC announcement scheme anymore, right? Because last year we had a lot of privacy-related updates through the year. So it's not like one event in a year that will have something new. No, sorry. The Apple review guidelines are changing every couple of months. Well, not changing, but let's say improving. Okay, let's call it improving. Okay, so the guidelines are improving. New privacy-related, tracking-related changes implementing during the year. So it's not like previous years anymore. It's not like all developers are waiting for WWDC and then make some changes. No, now you need to be inside this ecosystem and read the news all the year around.
Yes, and among the latest updates, Apple is going to reject apps that uses SDK that use IDFA and adjust code under the fire for this. And also, for example, big players and the China market gains are trying to, find a workaround and build some unique users identifiers based for some unique users' privacy settings, and like build such a fingerprint to cross track users across the apps. How do you think will this like tries be successful? Worth it to like spend the time to build something instead of IDFA, or like this naming of this? It's not really important, but the meaning is important for Apple. Like
yeah, I really like this like drama, let's call it privacy drama that is happening. Because if we step a step back, so what is happening right now? There is like IDFA, right? We all know this. This is identifier, like advertising identifier that Apple introduced many years ago. And as a developer, you can use it to track users, basically, to show them ads, right? But if I remember correctly, as developers, you need to like ask Apple to allow you to use it. And this IDFA, it was like introduced many years ago, so nothing new here. However, IDFA is not the only way how to identify users, how to track them. And there is a whole set of companies, businesses that help to identify users, that help to show ads, or help with like anti-fraud features, right? So sometimes user identification is not related to ads, and it's not related to selling data, but it may be related to with security, with anti-fraud, with like malware, anti-bot things. So IDFA, one thing, and other similar ways to identify user. What we see right now, what is happening right now, Apple says that privacy is very important and introduces a lot of changes with privacy and a lot of communications with users. Now we see all this nice and shiny like alert boxes saying this application tries to use Bluetooth, etc., etc. And Apple has introduced the new permission, the new alert. This application wants to track the user, right? And the user now, starting from iOS 14 something, can accept or reject this tracking. However, this permission is related to IDFA. So if you're kind of like good developer, if you want to use IDFA, you show this permission. If user says reject, you receive null. You don't receive IDFA at all, and that's fine. It works as expected. No problem here. But the drama is with this second set, with there are other ways to identify user, not IDFA related, right? So with these many companies that already have working businesses to identify user, technically saying the way how they identify user, for example, grabbing IP, grabbing some user fingerprint based on location, based on Wi-Fi networks, yada yada, these ways they are not like regulated. So from data perspective, this is not a sensitive data. This is not a regulated data. So technically saying, many companies can use different ways to identify users, right? Because it's not under some regulations, it's not prohibited. However, Apple tries to put a lot of efforts to make this tracking visible for users. And from Apple perspective, these other companies that use other ways of identifier contradicts these new ideas, like these privacy ideas of Apple, right? So that's the drama from my understanding, okay? So from my understanding, this is the drama that Apple wants many companies to ask user permission. At the same time, companies use other ways to identify user, and they kind of don't need to ask these permissions.
My understanding of the problem is that they see the issue in sharing data across the apps. So you can ask data to build personalized experience inside the app, but such solutions like just gathering them from different apps, and like for example, China developed their own IDFA to share it, and they want to prevent it, and already discussing that it will not be allowed. So that's the second issue.
Yeah.
Permission.
And this SDK that you mentioned at the beginning, Adjust SDK, right? This is the SDK that basically provides developers a way to identify users, and one of the ways is using IDFA, and in other ways are using other different IDs, let's put it this way. So from my understanding, this SDK doesn't respect when user says, I don't want you to track me, but doesn't respect that and still provides developers a way to identify user using these other identifiers, not IDFA. And technically saying it's not like black and white, because Apple doesn't write it anywhere except for guidelines that you should respect choice, but Apple doesn't have any enumeration what things you should not grab, right?
They actually stating that app tracking transparency should be applied to any means of tracking the user across apps. So IDFA is which could be measured in code, basically. So you can either get the real IDFA or you get null. But for other means, you still have to ask user, and you still have to respect the user's choice. So that's actually the drama, right? But you have to do that according to Apple.
Yeah, but this is a very vague definition, because it's super gray area, because you can identify users by many means, like IP addresses, by their user ID, right? And I feel that this is the field of of improvement, and we will see how different companies react on that. And I definitely feel companies that work with user identification, like this anti-fraud and anti-malware companies, that doesn't relate it to showing ads and doesn't relate it to show to sell user data, but they still rely on some IDs. So it's really interesting for me to see how the situation will expand.
Speaking of users' data, selling that, and large companies, we could not skip latest news on the Facebook. Well, I mean, it's not really related to iOS 14.5, but come on, 500 million account entries were leaked for free. Well, speaking of Facebook,
So, I really like how you describe the things. Speaking of data, large companies and selling the data, Facebook comes to mind. Well, as Apple developers, we can't not speak about Facebook, right? So what's the story here? And I feel that this is not something super new, but it's something that has been around right now. So people speak about this data leak really often these days. So what have happened? People found that some Facebook data-related databases are there in the wild, and these Facebook databases, data leaks, they contain Facebook user ID, right? Phone number of the user, and some public info of the user. As I understood. As I understood what had happened. So Facebook has different APIs, and one of them is reset password API. So attackers were able to use this reset password API to enumerate user phone numbers. So they were just, brute forcing, they were just enumerating random phone numbers looking strings. And if this phone number is linked to any Facebook account, Facebook would respond to this API query with user ID. Then using this user ID of existing users, they were able to perform GET requests, get all public fields. So technically speaking, the only important information in this leak is that now we have not only public user IDs in Facebook, they are public, it's not something secret, but we have them with Facebook user ID and with phone number. right? But I believe that many users, when they put their phone number to any service, they kind of have
don't care.
this, yeah, they have this thought in the background that if you put something in the internet, it will be public sooner or later, right? So I wouldn't say that this data leak is a result of a hack. No, but this is a result of really long and I would say like accurate work, because people would require a lot of time to grab those IDs and to enumerate those phone numbers one by one. And Facebook, they have a lot of API defenses. It's not so easy. You cannot just enumerate, like 100 requests per second, because Facebook will throttle this request and then will like ban you and your IP address, right? So I believe that people who was collecting this database, they spent a lot of time to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Like my respect, but okay, of course, from user perspective, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and by the way, Facebook actually recently changed its narrative to app tracking transparency. So what they basically now saying is that when this change will come into effect, basically with the iOS 14.5, more businesses will actually use Facebook for advertisement because of like other platforms will lack tracking. And so yeah, the tracking will rely now on Facebook's data, not on like the whole user data. But well, I believe that's basically like we were not able to change this. We were not able to change like narrative in the environment. So like let's accept it and play like a good game with that. So that, I believe that's not like they actually think it's good for them, but like let's make us look a little bit better with this situation. So I don't know. I mean, like very weird change of their narrative, like coming from paper ads. I mean, like they put paper ads against Apple, like Facebook as an advertisement platform, like online, and they're using newspapers to attack another company. Like weird, really weird.
Honestly, I'm not like a big fan of watching all these big corporation fight, because when I do, I always try to I'm asking a question: who will gain, who will profit from all the things happening? And we don't know the answer. We can just speculate about the topic, and it's very fun to speculate about the topic. I agree. Yeah, okay. I agree. Let's see. Yeah.
So if you don't fan of this, so let's move to more engineering stuff.
Yeah, just one more thing regarding this Facebook leak. So I would like to do some kind of summary, right? If you as a developer, if you work on the service that has phone number, right? So you have users have profile, and they have phone numbers. Take a look on your API design. Chances are that you might have the same kind of, it's not a vulnerability, it's the same API design that will allow someone to enumerate phone numbers. If you use phone number as a primary key, for example, if you use phone number as thing that will have a phone number that will return you user ID. So take a look on your API design on methods that put user, like create user, and methods that read user, like get user, and try to understand if it's possible to reproduce similar behavior on your API, and what can you do to prevent that. An easy way to prevent that is, of course, different API defenses like throttling, like rejecting requests after some number of requests, like blocking account. But blocking account is kind of suspicious feature, because you can block somebody else's account. As attacker, I can use somebody else's number, right? So mostly like network-based, API-based defenses might help here.
Nice advice. I think so. As it's should be like tested anyway, and maybe security testers should include it in their test cases for sure now. So I'm like an engineer or developer. Usually, I download different proof of concept or demo apps from GitHub to try it, and it was hot recently. This topic that of a harmful infected Xcode project that installed during compilation a script that executed before compilation, and it's not obvious. It's very hard to notice it, and maybe here some advices what to do on just not to download and run these applications.
Well, yeah, that's the main security advice. Don't download and run suspicious applications from the internet, right? But yeah, I agree with you that the story is that with the script, so in Xcode, you have this run script phase where you can put calling any script, and like SwiftLint is usually there, like a co-pods can be there, right? So the vulnerability, the malware was that in this like small window in Xcode, they were calling malware script, and this script actually had a backdoor, so it's kind of malware for macOS. And every time when developer runs their Xcode, run this project, like build the project and run the project, Xcode would run the script. The script would use this vulnerability and get access to macOS, like microphone, screen capture, if I remember correctly. So some macOS specific feature, camera, keyboard, right? So basically that's like, that's a malware. And Xcode again was used to spread this malware, and the story is very similar. I think that this story was named XcodeSpy, right? And this story is very similar to Xcode Go story. Do you remember Xcode Go story?
Yeah, like
Yes,
2015.
Yeah. There was a story that Xcode was used, so patched version of Xcode, malware Xcode, was used to produce malware iOS applications, right? If I remember correctly, the main idea is that in some countries, like in China, the internet connection inside the country is not so reliable, and Xcode is a huge piece of software.
It's always huge.
It's a pain to download it from App Store still,
Yeah, absolutely. Like 12 gigabytes. Oh my God. So what's the story that people patched Xcode, right? So introduce some malware into Xcode and put this Xcode to trackers, to BitTorrent trackers. So other people would download Xcode not from App Store, but from trackers, and they got this malware Xcode, and this malware Xcode was able to inject some malware code to iOS applications that developers were building with this Xcode. And it was really fun because it was discovered only when we had thousands of malware applications in China App Store. So imagine the scale of this thing. And of course, Apple patched that and introduced a lot of new security controls and security measures to make sure that Xcode integrity, to double check that Xcode is real, right? But still, they don't eliminate the attack vector itself, because people can still put Xcode to tracker and download Xcode from tracker, right? So they can still do it. And looking at this story with XcodeSpy, this new thing with running a script, it's kind of similar for me, because still developers are like a vector to spread malware to everywhere. Yeah.
It's actually very interesting in terms of, we expect developers to be like those super minds who are cautious, who think about everything, and they do they carefully select everything. No, they just download something from the internet, hit enter, and let's just like got their laptop or like iMac or whatever infected. Like, and yeah, this wouldn't happen if developers were cautious actually. So like some project you probably don't know where it's coming from. Like you will look into it or you'll just not run it at all, like because you don't know what's that. But as a developers, we probably need to be this kind of cautious. I mean, like, yeah, well, if we expect our apps to be secure, like we need to be secure in a way.
Well, I am biased because I work with developers in improving security, meaning that I usually deal with bad from security perspective applications. And I can say that most security guidelines written for security engineers, they have the same statement. Be careful, developers don't care about security, so you should not assume that they know what you're talking about. So you should explain things in a very, very easy way. So yeah, I don't understand why this happened.
Right.
And yes, I can agree that it's true. But when I'm building something like for end user, I, for example, select or choose some third party that like announce or like say, yes, I'm secure. I do everything for security, and I don't check it. I just, it's secure. Okay. For example, so I don't go in depth. I don't see its like sources also. So I know I need secure data, for example, or secure protocols or traffic or something. Okay, it's secure, and I assume it should be if they declare, and then don't go in the details.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, no one looks on this third-party libraries and the dependencies that we use, right? I don't know how many third-party libraries the typical iOS application has. I assume it's like 20 to 30. It's like typical scenario, except for maybe some organizations like banks that have strict security policies against using third-party libraries. Then maybe it's not 30, maybe it's 15. But people still use a lot of libraries. So.
Yeah, I recently prepared a talk on mobile development, and I was looking into third-party library management. So there was a case, there was a study actually. So one company checked a couple of modern apps that was for Android platform, but I believe it's still relevant for iOS as well, including like the AliExpress app or like whatever, so some big names. And they were using outdated third-party libraries which had vulnerabilities. But the problem here is not that they're using that. The problem was that this vulnerability was closed 2 years before that study in that library. So the guys developing the application simply don't care about everything they use. So the library is outdated for 2 years, and like they didn't care to update it.
Well, I wouldn't say that people don't care. If developers know about security practices, again, from my experience, they follow these practices. So it's not a lack of caring, because developers typically care about applications they create, right? Yeah. But it's more about ignorance, right? We don't know things that we don't know. We don't know they exist. We don't know that we should care about that. And with libraries, it's especially complicated because we have an application, it has libraries it depends on, these libraries have libraries that depend on, etc., etc., etc. So nested dependencies are real deal, especially in huge applications, especially when you have like 2 libraries and depend on another library, and you can't update them because something will be broken. However, fortunately, we have a lot of automated tools to help us to notify if we, like as developers, if we are using any dependencies that have known security issues, right? So these are tools like Snyk, like white source software. They are mostly useful for iOS only, but for iOS, Android, etc. But if you write like Python or JavaScript backend, you can use integrated into GitHub tools like Dependabot. It's part of GitHub. It's free. You can just implement it to work on pull requests, and they're extremely useful. However, what's the problem here? Hello.
Oh, hi there.
So we have a new guest in our podcast. No, let them back.
New star of the podcast, I would say.
Yeah, let's change the topic.
Let's move on.
I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of high-level APIs already on iOS, and before I left for maternity leave, we tend to get rid of third parties, few of them. For example, for networking, we're pretty happy with networking libraries that provided by iOS core. So it's tend to decrease dependencies, and it doesn't make code massive or duplicative or something like this.
Yeah, makes total sense. So I am like a maintainer of cryptographic library Themis. So I'm kind of responsible for people. I'm kind of adding dependencies into the applications. And the story is that iOS and Android, they have, for example, they have really good cryptographic libraries. In iOS, Common Crypto was old. Let's call it old and outdated. Let's not call it bad. Let's call it just old, right? But CryptoKit is a new, nice, shiny, boring crypto, high-level APIs, easy to use. However, CryptoKit provides these number of APIs, really few. Okay, now we have Android, and Android security library, and Android cryptographic library. It provides these number of APIs, few. However, when we write a multi-platform application for iOS and Android, and let's say we want to encrypt and decrypt the data, it's complicated to find same APIs, similar working APIs, because the APIs are different, key formats are different, and those platforms expect cryptographic data, binary data, to be in different formats. If to this scheme we add some backend, and we usually have a backend, right? We introduce yet another platform, let's say in Python, or let's say in Node.js, that has its own cryptographic libraries, with its own APIs, so an issue to befriend all those crypto APIs, and they're complicated. CryptoKit is great, but have you seen Python cryptographic library? Let's call it outdated as well, okay? It's not bad, it's just from last century. So yeah, I was explaining that I maintain a cryptographic library that is often used in these multi-layered, multi-platform applications because it makes it easier to befriend cryptographic API. And yeah, our library Themis, it depends on OpenSSL for iOS and Boring SSL for Android. Fortunately, Boring SSL is part of Android, well, in a sense, but it's not part of iOS. So yeah, we need to handle all the things. And sometimes when OpenSSL has yet another critical security vulnerability, we kind of try to analyze if the code of our library is using this vulnerable code of OpenSSL. I mean, how much time do we have until we are pushed to update, right? Because you can't do it all the time. You can't update library like every week. And for last couple of weeks, OpenSSL was updated every 2 weeks, I believe. So, and this is the cycle, and a lot of developers are in the cycle.
Right.
And yeah.
So we are actually now switched to the main part of our episodes. What practices can you recommend? I mean, we assume that developers are actually want to make secure app, right? Secure apps. So you said that might be an ignorance, so they might not know what things they are not doing right. So
yeah,
for those who are in a good way looking for the advices, let's go through something. I mean, is there something more we can recommend to look for? Besides asking you for more sophisticated advice or consultancy, but let's something to start with.
Of course, something to start with. The answer for all software security questions is OWASP.
Okay.
Open Web Application Platform. Security platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. So OWASP is an organization, right? And it's kind of a non-commercial organization, yada yada. Why we care? Because OWASP publish a lot of free guidelines for developers on any platform, on most platforms, with understandable security advices, right? So if you don't know anything about app security, start from OWASP top 10. Top 10 is it's like it's a first step. It's a short guideline about like security awareness. So what is 10? It's like 10 main risks, 10 main mistakes, 10 main issues that mobile developers have when they create their apps. If you don't work for mobile, if you work for web, check for OWASP top 10 for web, right? So there's two lists. One list, 10 problems for mobile, another list is 10 problems for web. First step, very first, very basic. Just read about them, educate yourself, and if you want to go deeper, each of these issues have a link about guidelines related to that. As a next level, I would suggest to read. I mean, I know that it sounds really boring, but finally to read the security guidelines and security recommendations by Apple and by Google. Luckily, Apple has a very nice security guideline. They merged, I think last year they merged the guidelines for iOS and macOS into one single guideline. They also have the guideline where they explain what security measures they introduce into iOS and macOS. So reading their guidelines, you can kind of understand what is there, what is the landscape, what are your possibilities, right? Google also has these Google security best practices and Android development like best practices. So these are nice things to start with. Next, if you're ready, if you're not like, if you have heard about some security things and you're like, hey, let's implement obfuscation, or hey, let's implement some static analyzer tools. So if you're curious to try something, next step will be checking out OWASP MASVS. It's a mobile application security verification standard, MASVS. It's a checklist. So it's a huge checklist of requirements, security requirements for an app, right? It has different chapters, like security requirements against authentication, security requirements against data storage, against protection for reverse engineering, yada, yada, yada. So depending on what features your application provides, which area are you in, you open this checklist, MSVS, and you start trying to estimate, to analyze how good or bad the application is from security perspective, right? So simple yes, no, yes, no. You calculate the amount of scores that you get, and this is your basic security level. Now your turn is trying to get it higher, trying to improve it. And for this purpose, you open OWASP MSTG, which is Mobile Testing Security Guide, Mobile Security Testing Guide. It's a sister project to MSVS. So if you open OWASP MSVS on GitHub, you will see a link to MSTG. So MSTG basically explains how to test all these requirements written in this huge checklist, but also MSTG can explain how to implement it better. So I wouldn't name it security engineering guideline, but it has a lot of nice advice. Also, like I and my team, we start contributing to OWASP because it's community-built project, and we had a lot of experience with mobile security. So now we try to push our experience to this, guidelines, industry-proven guidelines, and trying to educate even more developers through guidelines. So OWASP is the answer on how to start.
Okay, I think that would be it for today. Thank you very much. That was an interesting talk, but you want to say something more. right?
Yes, because of course, because when I start speaking about security, there is no way anyone can stop me. But I would suggest for developers that are curious in security just to follow some news. Obviously, I will promote my Twitter, like follow me on Twitter. I will also promote your Twitter, right? Follow Dennis and Irina if you have Twitter. I'm not sure.
Yes.
But at least people can follow Apple Treats Twitter, right? So follow
Sure.
us, like connect into this developer mesh.
Okay, that's a very good plug in here, and we definitely give links to the OWASP and to other documents we mentioned here. And thank you very much. That was an interesting evening, and it was an interesting talk. And yeah, thanks, Anastasiia. And
thank you for all your advices and your stories. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Ping me if you have security-related questions. Chances are high that I will just send the link to OWASP, but maybe I can actually answer them.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And for all our listeners and viewers, we will see you next time in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, people. Bye-bye.